All right, peoples, here we go. Continuing the notes for Chapter 5. We're going to start with Section 3 of your notes in this video and take it on right on through the end. Getting away from the read. In this section, we're going to talk about all different tips and tricks about doing reading and interpretation and taking that copy and turning it more than just something that you read. As a voice actor, you will need to learn how to read in a way that sounds like you are just talking to another person, as if you were having a casual conversation. That intimacy that I was talking about in the last video, where radio personalities make it sound like they're talking to that one person that's listening, that just one solitary guy or gal. We're trying to do the same thing, to make it sound intimate, to make it sound personal, to make it sound like it's just us and them. Understanding the big picture. The more you understand the story, the more internalized it'll be, and the less you will need to rely on the words in the script in order to tell the story effectively. This is one of the more important ones because it's going to encompass a lot of the other tips and tricks that we're going to talk about in this particular chapter. That if you understand your part in the entire piece, the way that I like to talk about it is having a vision for the message, the way that it's being communicated, what the results are going to be. If you understand all of that and you understand your role in all of that, it's going to be a much easier sort of thing for you to be able to interpret the voice that that character needs to have. The 6 W's and the H. What we're talking about here, this is kind of a take on the journalistic questions, the 5 W's and the H, but as you see, we got 6 W's. Basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to look at those journalistic questions but turn them into ways that we can answer those questions and then interpret it into a dramatic element. So we need to read the script to get a superficial understanding. Again, get the big picture, understand the vision for the script, understand your role in that vision. And then after you get that real cursory look, reread the script again and look for these basic dramatic elements. So there's the basic journalistic questions, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And then we add another W. We want to know the weather. And what we mean by weather here isn't necessarily is it sunny, is it cloudy, is it raining. What we're talking about is what is the environment of the story. Maybe that includes literal weather, but it could also be what particular circumstances are going on. Are you in the middle of a big bustling city block crowd? Are you at a concert? Are you in a serene park setting? Is there some sort of chaos that is going on? Perhaps a sporting event? Are you driving around in a car? Are you in a car race? All these sorts of things. That's what we mean by weather. So what's going on around and about you? Where are you in relation to all of that? And there's a lot of tips in the textbook about how to ask some of these 6 W's and H questions to help you to be able to get a feel for how you need to interpret the script and how you need to interpret your character in the script based on your answers to those questions. Ask what-if questions. This opens up the opportunity for experimentation and breaking out of one delivery style that is comfortable for you. So, what if I did something this way? What if I changed it up and interpreted it that way instead? What would the result be? So, that idea of experimentation, a little trial and error, helps the mind wander. And when you put some of those into practice, you may discover that something works rather effectively, or maybe it doesn't and you need to do something else. Also, try this trick. Try speaking as if. Deliver a line as if you were in a certain situation or were feeling a certain emotion. I'm speaking as if I just got the birthday present I really wanted. I'm speaking as if I just got the worst news of my life. I'm speaking as if I looked outside and it's raining. And that could be a good or a bad thing, depending on maybe there was a drought, so you want the rain, or maybe you're getting ready to go to the amusement park and the skies opened up. So these questions are going to help you to be able to channel what sort of delivery you need to give to your lines. Character departure. As you work with each line of a script, you want to deliver the line in completely different ways. It's only through exploring departures from your initial choices and the other what-ifs that you will be able to make the strongest choices for delivering your copy. Many times our first inclination is going to be a good one, but sometimes we may discover something that we hadn't thought of before if we don't try experimenting with different approaches to the way of doing a different read. You might find that adding some pregnant pauses in a script, or emphasizing different words, or playing around with words a little bit, saying them in funky ways, might be able to give you a much more rich interpretation of what it is that the character that you're reading for is trying to say. Listen and answer. Listen to all of these people, and it will help you to be able to figure out how to deliver certain lines and to interpret the script that you have. Listen to your audience so that your response is appropriate. Does the audience get what it is that you're trying to do, what you're trying to say? Does it make sense to the audience member? Can they picture you in their mind, in the scene, the way that you want them to? Listen to your character and to the other performers. Interact with what is being said, and as you do so, be real in that element. Don't do something that is going to be way out there unless that's what the script calls for. But you want to be able to have a somewhat believable relationship between your character and the other characters, or your character and the environment that the character is in. Listen to yourself as you deliver the lines. Observe your initial response. We tend to know if something sounds pretty good or something sounds pretty bad. That should help us to be able to gauge whether we need to do something different or not. Listen to the director in your mind to stay on track. You need to be able to think critically and objectively. Listen to the producer or director to take your performance to where it needs to go. You want to be able to reach the producer's vision for what the piece is supposed to sound like. They may ask you to take it in a different direction. You need to be able to pivot and do the different thing as you're being directed to. Finally, listen to your body. Listen to your body's physical tension, its emotional energy, the things that are built up inside of you as you're performing that character. It may guide you to doing something a little differently or something a little more profoundly. Let's talk about developing a lead-in line for scripts that you have. You can think of this as a pre-life of sorts. A lead-in line is simply a short statement or a possible backstory that will give your character pre-life before the first line of copy. Most stories are going to have something that's going on before the actual instance of what is happening in the script at that particular moment. Say you are driving a brand new car. What's happened prior to you getting into that car and driving? Maybe you're talking about needing a roofer to come and repair the roof on your house. What happened prior that made you need a roofer? Is it just that the roof is 30 years old and it's time? Or perhaps something happened, a tree fell on it, made it so that you need somebody in an emergency? What's going on? Developing a lead-in line will help you to be able to kind of get into the proper mindset and attitude that you need to have for your particular read. You can say that lead-in line silently, or you can say it out loud. Now, if you choose to say the line out loud, you want to make sure you leave a little bit of silence so that the editor can remove the unwanted lead-in line, because the lead-in line you develop doesn't become part of the script. It's just a tool to help you to be able to get into character. Your lead-in line or your pre-life will set up a conversational delivery that helps you to be able to close the gap and communicate your message on an emotional level. So let's go back to the example of the roofer. If it's 30 years old and it's just time because that's what they say the life of a roof is, and you're doing a commercial for this roofing company, then maybe your lead-in line would be, this house has held up pretty well. The roof has done pretty well, but that roof is 30 years old, and I want to get ahead of things before I get into where I need to have it done in an emergency. So kind of that pre-planning mindset, that being prepared sort of thing, that's going to result in a much different delivery than, oh no, a tree just fell on my roof. There's a huge gaping hole. I need somebody here. I need somebody here yesterday, and I need somebody that's going to do it right so that the rest of my house doesn't get ruined. That's going to either be an attitude of anger or an attitude of fear. And you don't have the planning aspect. You need someone you can trust, and you need them right away. That's going to create a difference in your delivery as well. Now, just as you can develop a lead-in line, you can also develop a lead-out line. What happens in the afterlife? What happens at the end of the script? A lot of times in fairy tales we just say, and they lived happily ever after. Well, what does that happily ever after look like? With the person that's doing the roofing commercial, it's they've got a new roof. It doesn't leak. They're prepared and set for the next 30 years because of the great job the roofing company did. So a lead out line will help you to maintain your character beyond the last word spoken. And occasionally a lead out line can also help you determine the appropriate mood, attitude, or emotion for a line. And here's another reason why this is important. A common problem that many beginning voice talent experience is that when they get to the end of a script, their delivery begins to fall off, and any character that they've created loses believability. And the result is a fade out in energy and delivery, almost as if the character dies at the end of the script. This is why we talk about characters having an afterlife. So you and I, when we're done going out with friends on a Friday night or whatever we're doing, socializing, we don't cease being ourselves. Our lives don't end when we say good night to our friends after a night on the town. We continue living on. We continue to have experiences, and we continue to have the personality that we have. So the idea of the lead out line is to help us to remain in character throughout the entire piece of script, right up to the end, that we don't just kind of lose that passion. We don't lose that character focus when we say the last few lines of our copy. That way, the believability of the character is consistent from the very beginning of the script, with the help of a lead-in line, on to and through the end of the script, because we have that lead-out line. The lead outline is something that should be appropriate for the context of the story as well. So again, it's not just, the roof is built, the man's happy, they live happily ever after. It's the roof is built, the man is happy, the man is secure in the quality job that's going on, the man is able to continue on with the basic functions of living in his house and kind of resume normal everyday activities. So that is the role of a lead outline. And it's something that you create. It's not going to be something that's in the script. You create it to help you maintain your character right on to and through the end of your copy. Billboarding, giving a word or phrase that extra punch, that special impact or treatment that it needs, is often referred to as billboarding. Now, there's some different ways that you can do billboarding. You can give a slight pause before or after certain words that you want to billboard. Think of like a William Shatner sort of thing, where many times we pick on William Shatner because we're used to him saying things in a weird way. Unless you're doing a William Shatner type of character, you probably don't want to do that. But when you do give a slight pause when you're talking in the scope of a sentence, especially if it's not where a natural pause would be, you're billboarding in that you're kind of giving that extra punch to the words that you're about to say. Slowing down. When you say something slow, it gives the sense that you're speaking very deliberately. And people tend to pay attention to that. Changing body language or facial expression. The more that you move your body in different ways, the more that you make different faces as you're saying things, they're going to express to those that can see you certain types of reactions and emotions, but it's also going to come out in the way that you speak. Right now, you can't see me, but I'm moving my hands around and I'm kind of stretching my face out quite a bit to where I probably have a little bit of an anxious sound to me, or kind of a pseudo-frantic sort of sound to me. So body language, the way you move your face, is going to help you to be able to give voice in certain situations. Changing inflection on a word or a phrase. We're talking about here, one of the best cases for inflection is that, for example, when we ask a question, we tend to speak up at the end of a sentence. But not just when we ask a question. It can also be whenever we're unsure of something or we're not quite confident in the answer that we're giving. We can also inflect up when we're trying to emphasize something or make a distinction on something. Like if you were talking about the fact that, I live in a log cabin, as opposed to, I don't know whether the type of cabin, just a metal cabin or something. But you might inflect up on the word log to let them know you live in a log cabin as opposed to a metal cabin. Reducing the volume of your voice. Giving a soft, subtle approach to a read can make it feel sultry, can make it feel like perhaps there's a secret, something you don't want others to know. And it catches people's attention. And these are just a handful of many ways that you can billboard words. Emphasis, changing the intensity to add importance or value, specifically in terms of adding vocal weight to specific syllables. So here we're not necessarily just talking about getting louder or accenting or punctuating words, although that is a way to do emphasis, but that's not the only way that you can do emphasis. Some of the other things that we've talked about gives emphasis to words as well. The change in volume, whether it's louder or softer. The way that we inflect different words. Maybe give a slight twist on a pronunciation. When giving emphasis to a word, the delivery still needs to be genuine and natural. It can't be forced. It needs to fit within the scope of the rest of everything that you're saying. When you have your copy in front of you, good to have a pencil with you. You can underline words, you can underline syllables. It's a good reminder for you on how to provide emphasis in your read. Some people even do arrows or kind of make starbursts around certain words so that it makes them pay attention to it. It's never a bad thing to mark up your copy and make notes to yourself so that as you're doing a read, you can say something in the way that you want to say it. Personal pronouns. Those are connecting words that help the voice actor reach the audience on an emotional level. When emphasizing personal pronouns, the meaning shifts from the subject of the sentence to the individual being addressed. So, if you're talking about how important you are, the subject becomes not so much your importance as much as you yourself. One of many examples. Work the consonants. Limiting the emphasis or value on only the primary consonant of a word will help a word to pop, giving it a crisper edge in the context of a sentence. So if you are deliberately trying to make your words stand out, you can emphasize that first letter of a word, and it makes people pay attention. Building transitions. A transition is a bridge between concepts within a line, between subjects within a script, or between characters. So you're going from one thought to another, from one thing to another. These transitions may or may not be shown on the script by some form of punctuation. Now, going back to your grammar class, if you see points of ellipse, places where you give pause, a long dash, or a semicolon that's going to separate one part of a sentence from another. Commas helping us to distinguish lists. Punctuation helps us quite a bit in those cases, but it's not always going to be available for us to be able to notice certain transitions from a certain thought to another thought, or a certain aspect of a thought to another aspect. Those are going to be more played out in the way that the sentences are written. Transitions help us to engage the audience and to keep their attention. We tend to pay attention a little more when we notice that there's a shift in the conversation in one way or another. Conjunctions, those are words loaded with opportunity for creating transitions and building interest through your performance. We're talking about these three in particular: and, but, and, or. And, an additive word connecting two or more things. But, indicating opposites. Yes, this, but that. And then the word or, connotating a comparison between two things. Now, putting too much emphasis on a conjunction can actually make what follows the conjunction lose its value. So, if you're talking about how important your grades are in this class, but you've got a lot going on, people might not hear the "you've got a lot going on" because you put so much emphasis on the or. So you want to be careful about that. When you use your conjunctions, you want to use them in such a way that you don't lose the entire meaning of the sentence and you don't lose the comparing or contrasting aspect of what these words can bring to the table. Dealing with lists. The way a list is handled may differ depending on the context of the script, the character speaking, or the genre of the voiceover work. A couple of things to keep in mind here: adding conjunctions in a list, or sometimes separating items with a beat can add impact. Think about, if you go to your favorite fast food restaurant and you ask, hey, what's on the Big Mac? So those of you that watch classic commercials may know this one. So there's 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. So there I did not add a conjunction. I didn't have the word and in there at all. But I gave different emphasis to the different ingredients that's inside a Big Mac so that you can kind of follow along with the list, but not get bored with the fact that I'm just saying 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, and onions on a sesame seed bun. That's kind of bland. So we want to play with lists in such a way that when we have to give a list, we want to continue to keep the listener engaged. Another thing you can do is eliminate conjunctions, and that can create a sense of authority and drama. You can build suspense that way. 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, all of that on a sesame seed bun. Yeah. Makes you want to go get a Big Mac now, doesn't it? Tell them I sent you. Maybe they'll give you a discount. Probably not. Contrast and comparison. A contrast and comparison will be followed by a benefit as to why one or the other is better. It's your job to make the difference very clear to the listener. A contrast and comparison is best delivered by understanding the meaning of all aspects of the story and the ultimate benefit being discussed. So if you've got situation A and situation B and you're talking about how they're similar or how they're different, the way that you describe those things is going to come out, and through the way you interpret that with your voice, there's going to be usually some sort of way to determine which item the speaker thinks may be better between the two, or try as best as possible to show the objective differences or what they have in common to allow the listener to make a decision for himself, herself. Removing unessential parts of the script can help to get to the heart of the contrast and the comparison. Now, I want to mention here that depending on what kind of read you're doing for what kind of client, you may or may not have liberties to be able to rewrite a script. So if you do have that liberty, you may want to play around with that a little bit in terms of just taking out a lot of fluff and getting to the heart of a matter, especially when you're talking about contrast and comparison. Otherwise, the way that you get through that is to talk about those sort of things in such a way that, again, you either present it in such an objective way that you're letting the listener decide if there is a better of the options, or that you give suggestion as to which option may be better by the way you deliver those lines. Adlib to create realism. There might be opportunities for ad-libbing even with copy that is locked in. Again, we may not have liberties to change a script, but if we do, there can be some opportunities to add a little bit of humor, add a little bit of humanism into a script to make it more personable to the listener. So when you come across a script that is obviously written for the eye and not the ear, what do I mean by that? There are things that we read on a piece of paper that will make more sense to us when we're reading it on paper as opposed to if we verbalize it. And there's also going to be times where we verbalize something that it's going to make much more sense when we hear it as opposed to when we actually read it. So in this case, we're talking about something that's written in such a way that it's meant to be read kind of silently, not necessarily read out loud and spoken out. So if you come across a situation like that, it might be worth asking if minor adjustments can be made to make the delivery more conversational. However, unless your client has specifically given you permission to adjust a copy, it must be read as written. Some cases in particular where you're really not going to have a lot of freedom to change the script would be things like audiobooks. If there's certain character phrases, if you're doing Bugs Bunny and he says, "What's up, Doc?" You're not going to be able to say, "Hey, what's going on, Doctor?" That doesn't work. Also, legalese. A lot of commercials and scripts nowadays include a lot of legal language that must be read in a certain exact way with certain exact verbiage. So you may not always get the opportunity to ad-lib, but when you do, it's an opportunity to make things more pleasant for the listener, to make things more conversational, to make things more personal. Many clients, especially in advertising, welcome the help of bringing the words of their script to life, especially for advertising clients. If a company writes their own script, it may not necessarily be something they do all the time unless they're working with an ad agency and the ad agency does it for them. So you may get the opportunity to help them to be able to present themselves in the best light with the words that they choose. Now, you can't change the context of the copy, but you can take some liberties of embellishment to breathe some life into the script. Again, a lot of that is going to be in terms of personality and personalism. So when you have those opportunities, take them. It's a way of making the copy your own. Let's talk about the tell. The biggest challenge with voiceover copy is to create a sense of authenticity, truth, reality, and knowledge through the performance. Performance characteristics that affect the believability of the character and credibility of the message can be a voiceover tell. The biggest tell is when one can tell when a script is merely being read. So, if you're doing like catch breaths, if you're doing pauses in long copy, especially if you're pausing in places that it really doesn't sound like the pause makes sense to go there. So, in order to be able to basically make it so that people can't tell that you're just winging it, reading through something, making it sound like you read something, you want to know your script well. You want to know the vision for the entire piece, know the vision for your role within that piece, and do your best to present that material in such a way that it's engaging, that it sounds like they're your own words or the character's words that you're portraying, and make that script come to life. Every character has a vocal range in which their voice will sound genuine and authentic. One common occurrence of breaking out of the primary vocal range happens at the end of a sentence, where you can take delivery to a higher pitch, maybe throwing away an ending thought. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Maybe even, if it helps, kind of create that afterlife line, the lead out line, from line to line to line if you need to, in order to make sure that you stay in character and help to keep that flow and keep that consistency. Downspeak or a downward inflection at the end of a line will create a perceived sense of authority in the mind of the listener. A downward inflection implies a statement of fact that is understood by the listener on an unconscious level. Upspeak or an upward inflection at the end of a line implies insecurity, fear, and a lack of confidence. So these are things that you want to be careful for. Sometimes they're effective to be able to create that sense of authority in the downspeak or the sense of insecurity in upspeak. But unless the script calls for it, unless the line calls for it, it is something that you want to be aware of and try to avoid. Diphthongs. Speaking quicker sounds more conversational. Something to keep in mind there. And speaking flatter prevents over-enunciation or adding too much musicality to your read. Be careful when you speak quicker that you're still getting out the words in such a way that the listener can understand what you're saying. When you speak flatter, you want to be careful there as well, because on one hand, a script may call for a monotone voice, but if you speak flat and speak a little too flat, you get the over-enunciation that sounds kind of awkward. A diphthong is a sound that is formed when two vowels are combined in a single syllable, like coin, or loud, or bay, or wait, or side. Elongating the diphthong or slowing down that part of a word can create an interesting interpretation that can be very useful for character voice work. And not just words, sometimes whole sentences. If you've ever listened to Yogi Bear, hey boo boo boy, the way that his voice goes up as a sentence goes along, that's an effective means of helping to create a character and to create a personality of a character. When you use it, though, you want to be intentional in doing that. All human emotion and feelings can be communicated vocally by simply changing physical tension. And we're talking about literal body language here. When you see a specific emotion or attitude, you want to find a place in your body where you can feel the tension of that emotion or attitude and hold on to it. When you hold tension in your body, it contributes to the realism and the believability of your character. If you're in a tense situation in real life, your body tends to tense up. If you're feeling stressed, you might encounter heavy breathing. You might have a more confused sort of sound or an anxious sort of sound. So we want to be careful here that, we don't necessarily trigger ourselves if we tend to be folks that become worked up literally when it comes to taking on different emotions artificially. But if you can do so safely, it can help you in creating effective characters. Now, let's talk about, voice actors, the ways they act, the way they move around, the way they present themselves. Some people might find them weird. If you're in a studio and you're doing all sorts of weird body language to help you be able to speak in a certain character, lots of people do that. And it may seem unnatural. You might be self-conscious about attempting to do something like that. And if that's you, rather than thinking about what the people around you think, when you're doing your movements, when you're doing weird sorts of things, doing your vocal exercises, doing different dances, moving your arms in certain ways. If you're subconsciously thinking about what other people think when you're doing these things, instead of thinking about how you're delivering the copy, you're not going to be able to do your best work. It comes down to developing an attitude of self-respect and knowing that you are doing the best job that you can possibly do. In the words of the great philosopher Gary Smalley, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, people like you. And you need to have that certain self-respect that you know what you're doing and you're doing what it takes to be able to get the job done. If getting to your best performance means that moving your entire body and waving your arms wildly are appropriate for your character, then that's what you need to do. You can't afford to worry that the people in the control room might think that you're crazy. Just get in there, do your job, do whatever it takes to get the job done. Now, to kind of finish things up here, let's talk about the magic of your mind. If you believe it, they will as well, they being the audience. Let's talk about suspension of disbelief. This is allowing yourself to be drawn into a story while being engaged in media. You're watching a movie, you're reading a book, whatever the case may be. But as you're doing so, cognitively that what is taking place in the story is not real. If you're watching your favorite movie on the big screen and you're watching some sort of science fiction sort of piece, there may be a lot of elements in that science fiction piece that we know cannot happen in real life. Nevertheless, in the point in time that we're watching that movie, we're taking all this in and we're participating in the story to the point that we can believe what is happening in the scope of the story. That is suspension of disbelief. When we talk about it in terms of voiceover, it is essential for creating a sense of believability because the audience must believe you. And for that to happen, you must, at least momentarily, believe in what you are saying. How to do that? Use your imagination to create a believable visual image in your mind for the message you are delivering. The more visual you can make it, the more believable it'll be for you and for your audience. The technical aspects and techniques of your voiceover work must become completely authentic to the point of where you are not even aware of them. Suspension of disbelief is you becoming the character, you actively participating in the scope of the story, of the script. Whether it's true to life or complete fiction, impossible in the real world, in time and space. Impossible in terms of you would never personally act the way that the character you're reading for would act. That you're doing a completely different personality. That the character has a completely different set of beliefs, attitudes, and values that you do personally. But in that moment, you're suspending your disbelief. You are becoming that person to help the story make sense and to help the listener to be able to create that story in their minds and participate along with you in that suspension of disbelief. So there we go. There's the notes for Chapter 5. As usual, make sure you check out the study questions, fill them out, and you want to make sure that you also submit those notes and study questions. Check out the pre-class questionnaire and attend the virtual class on this chapter when it comes along. And as always, make sure you monitor your Cougar Mail and Blackboard for any changes or updates to what's happening with the class.